My name is Lior Lukov from Azure Information Protection Product Management team. First of all, I'd like to thank you for staying that late. I know that this is the last session of the day. We're all after lunch, a bit heavy. Thank you very much for staying. I hope you'll find this session enjoyable and useful for you. I'll try to keep it as fun, as dynamic as possible. Plenty of hands-on demos. We're going to show you the product, not just a bunch of slides. We're going to cover the basics, of course, but I'd like to have a deep dive into the actual product, show you real-life demos, and educate you about the program, about the product. Before we begin, how many of you are familiar with Azure Information Protection? Please raise your hands. Wow, almost everyone. Excellent. How many of you have Azure Information Protection deployed in your organization? Please raise your hands. All right, very, very good. Thank you. All right, so I'll start with the first 5. There is some echo, thank you. The first 5 minutes or so is going to be some overview or background about what Azure Information Protection is about, and then we'll have a deeper dive into the actual product. So let's start with how a typical organization looks like, okay? We have sensitive data spread all around our organization. We have users, end users are using endpoint devices, mobile devices, Android, iOS. Some of your documents are shared on a local file repository. Some of them are on the cloud. We are in an area of foster collaboration. We'd like to keep our organization productive as much as possible and our end users productive as possible. For that reason, we let them collaborate and share the information. That means that also sensitive information will be shared either internally within the organization or externally with other non-employees. How can you make sure that your data is always safe? How can you make sure that the sensitive data, the crown jewels in your organization is always under your control? We'd like to give you the full flexibility, or your end users, the full flexibility to consume data, consume sensitive data, and share it with your colleagues, share it with the people who should be able to retrieve that data. However, we'd like to also give you that level of protection that whenever data leaks outside the organization, you have the full control, you have the monitoring tools, you have the tracking capabilities to do that. You can revoke the document if needed. And we all doing that in order to give you full control and give you the peace of mind that you know that your organization is always safe. Some of the key questions that normally CISOs ask themselves whenever they start deploying Azure Information Protection, or whenever they ask us about the product is, how can I know where my sensitive data is? I'd like to define, I pretty much know what sensitive information is within my organization, but how can I actually identify where is the location of that sensitive data? Even if I know where that sensitive data is, how would I know who accessed that data? Who has the right privileges to consume that data? Who has the right privileges to share it with others? Should we allow to print that document, copy it, paste it, maybe upload it to a first-party cloud or third-party cloud? How can we keep this control in place? And the most important thing is your crown jewels within the organization is always protected. Do you have the right level of protection, of encryption on your sensitive data? So by the end of this session, you will be able to answer all these questions here and many other questions of how you can better protect your organization with sensitive data. For that, we have in mind, we have 4 pillars in order to help you answer these questions. First one is all about data discovery. We have various tools to help you identify which data your end users are using, which data contains sensitive information. How can you discover it? How can you tell where are the various locations on endpoint devices? Which endpoint devices contain sensitive data? Where do you have a cloud presence which contains this data, and so on. Second one is about classification. So you know where your sensitive data is, but you'd like to classify it. Why is it important to classify your data? Is because once your data is classified, first of all, you can answer the question where your sensitive data is due to that classification. And secondly, you can also take actions on this data. You can create DLP rules to block that data whenever that data travels outside the organization. You can create rules that even if the data is available internally, it's going to be available only for certain users, which belong to certain groups and not to others. And third one is about protection. So vast majority of the documents are not going to be protected, but maybe there are going to be 1%, 2% of documents which we'd like to make sure that they're always protected and secured, avoiding sharing them with people who shouldn't have the rights to consume them. And last but not least, it's about monitoring. How can we give you the right tools that you can monitor who is using your product properly, who is classifying the content, and how the documents are being used externally. And our product goes across various various workloads. We have a solution for devices, we have a solution for applications, we have a solution for cloud services, and we have a solution for on-premise. So what we're going to show you today is how you can use Azure Information Protection. In fact, now this is called Microsoft Information Protection. I'll touch it later on, to protect the sensitive data within your organization. But in order to protect your sensitive data, it all starts with being able to classify your document properly. So for that purpose, we created a metadata, which is called a label. Label is, you can look at that as a text, which is basically embedded into your documents, into your emails. And the purpose of that metadata is to classify or to flag that document as being sensitive or non-sensitive. You can also create certain levels of sensitivity labels, for example, saying, hey, this document is public, this document is personal, other one is general, confidential, highly confidential. But the most important part is that by classifying a document, the document is not only classified, but the label is persistent. That means that it lives with the document. Whenever you're going to share that document externally, whenever you're going to send it over email, whenever you're going to put it on SharePoint, that label remains with the document, and you cannot remove that label from the document. Let me show you a quick example of how classification looks like from the end user perspective. Okay, now we care only about the end users. Later on, the rest of the session is going to be about you, about the data admins, of how you can control this classification. But let's see what's going to be the experience from the end user perspective. For that purpose, let me just open Microsoft Word. Here we go, just creating a new document. And you see this nice simple toolbar on top. So whenever I'm just trying now to create a new document, me as an information worker has the ability to classify the document and say, hey, am I working on a sensitive document? Should I classify it maybe as confidential? Under confidential, I can choose the level of sensitivity of that document. For example, should it be available for all employees or only for certain employees? Maybe this is highly confidential, and so. So the whole purpose of having these labels is by educating your end users, hey, please use the right labeling taxonomy and please choose the right label of your document. But what happens if your end users are basically using sensitive information from various sources and they are less security conscious? For example, if you've been working with people from HR department, legal department, and so on, finance department, they are less IT-oriented than you guys, and they're going to be less security conscious like you guys. So what you would like to do is basically educate them with the product, within the product, of how they should use the product better. Just give you an example. Here you can just open a document which contains PII data. For example, we have some Netherlands IDs, we have some Belgium IDs, UK driving license, and so on. Simply just going to copy this data here. Here's my document. Just created, let's save it first. All right, and now I'm simply just going to paste the sensitive data that I just copied. As soon as I saved the document, look what happened. First of all, I got this pop-up here saying, hey, it is recommended to label this label as confidential. Why? Because we identified that it contains sensitive information. If I'm going now to click on Change Now, see what happens. I got a header saying, hey, this document contains confidential data. I also got a watermark saying that that document contained confidential data, and I had a footer. I could also configure my system, but I could also configure the label to apply protection in certain cases. This is up to you. Now let's create a new document. And now I'd like to copy some credit card information. All right, here's my document again. Just copied credit card information and save it. Look what happened this time. This time, Word did not ask me for I'd like to reclassify the document. It simply reclassified it automatically on my behalf, classifying it as highly confidential. That means that we could tell that for certain values, for certain data, the Word should automatically classify this document. And we give you the full power, the full control to be able to create these conditional rules automatically and determine whenever you'd like to send a recommendation or whenever you'd like to automatically classify that document. All right, so we understand how labeling works and what is the principle behind labeling for the end user, for the information worker. But now you as an admins would like to create and have full power and full control of creating those classification labels. You'd like to configure them. Maybe in some organizations you'd like to have only 2 or 3 labels. In others you'd like to have more restricted set of labels. Now I'll actually show you how you can actually do that. By the way, if there are any people in the audience who've been to our session from yesterday, so the first 15 minutes or so are going to be pretty much identical, and then we're going to have a deep dive into more capabilities of the product, which we haven't covered yesterday. So I'd like to start with how you can actually configure those labels. This is Office Security and Compliance Center, for those of you who are familiar with that. Under Office Security and Compliance Center, there is a section here called Classification. I'm going to open it, and below that you'll see labels. Now, once this is going to be opened, you'll notice that here I'm going to just open it and show you the different labels that we have. And you'll see that while this is the end user experience, and here are the different labels that a user can choose from, this is how it looks like from the admin point of view. So from this screen, you can actually create your own labels dynamically and deploy it for various users within the organization. So let's do an example here, and let's create a new label. I'm just going to call it confidential finance, for example. And I can put a tooltip. That means whenever you move your mouse over that label, it will give you some description here. And I can choose whether I'd like to encrypt it or not. That means that whenever one of your information workers is going to choose that label, that document is going to be automatically encrypted as well. We'd like to keep the system as easy as possible because we know that our information workers are less tech savvy than others, and for that purpose, we are doing the encryption automatically. Let's keep it encrypted. I can also choose if I'd like to encrypt it on emails only or emails and files. I can choose that I'd like to assign it for certain users from certain groups. So for example, I'm going to click on Assign Permissions, and now I can choose, for example, to make this label available only for people from the financial team. So let's just click here on Add, and choose Finance. I'm going just to click these 2 groups. And then, very easy and straightforward. And also remember that you have to do that only once. Once you configure your labels, you're good to go, and all your users are going to consume them. Now you can also configure content marking, which we've seen in our example. This is the location where you can dictate what are going to be the headers, the footers, the watermarks. I'm going to skip that for now. You can also apply endpoint data loss prevention capabilities. You can determine if this is going to be available or certain sites and groups. And you can also set auto-labeling rules. So for example, this is quite handy whenever you'd like to educate your users whenever they should classify a document into certain value or another. So for example, in the example that we've seen earlier of being able to identify PII data or credit card data, how you can do that. So by choosing auto-labeling, you can detect the content of the file that contains certain match or certain pattern, and then apply a label based on your match condition. So for instance, I'm going to click on a condition here and say, okay, condition contains sensitive information type. And now I have a dictionary of nearly 100 different sensitive information types that I can choose from. So I can choose from sensitive information types from the financial sector, from HIPAA, from PCI, GDPR, and so on. For example, I'm going to choose all the ones which are relevant for the European Union. Simply just put EU here. And these information types are being updated periodically. The information type itself, the patterns, and how they're going to be identified. I'm going to click on Done here. And we also give you the granularity level that you can choose how many instances of this specific match are required in order to invoke, to trigger that new auto-classification label. You can choose one or more. You can also control the confidence level or the accuracy level of how many matches are required in order to bring that label on. And finally, you can choose if whether that label is going to be classified, it's going to be applied automatically, or maybe you'd like just to give it as a recommendation. By the way, for those of you who are sitting at the back seats, I really encourage you to move closer, as we're going to have plenty of demos here, and it's going to be a bit difficult to see everything. So you're welcome. There are plenty of seats in the first few lines, first few rows. And here we got all the full settings. You can review them, and clicking on Create, and basically that would create a new label, and we made it available only for certain users. So that gives you the full flexibility. Also, you can create labels in multi-languages as well. The same full list of languages that Office supports is supported for Azure Information Protection. All right, so let's now just want to continue here and give you a rule of thumb of how you should be creating your, what is the efficient way to create labels within the organization. So first of all, whenever you deploy Azure Information Protection, it comes up with a preset of labels available for you as default. We strongly encourage you, if you do not know how to start, how to begin with, some organizations, it takes them up to 6 months to determine what are going to be the right set of labels. You can start with the default one, you can change it ad hoc all the time, so feel free to start with the most trivial one that you believe with, and then go into the more sophisticated use cases. Second question is about protection. I know that lots of customers are quite concerned about what's going to be the impact of applying protection. What's going to be the business impact? Would it prevent other users from consuming the data? The answer is yes. And for that purpose, you have to be very careful before you apply protection. Our rule is basically start without deploying protection. For the first phase, once your end users feel comfortable about the content, about using labeling, and understanding the consequences of labeling a document, then you should move further for protection. And also remember, protection shouldn't be applied on all documents. You should try to apply it on maybe 1% to 2% of your documents altogether. Start with using the AP clients, which is like an add-on, which is running on Office applications, and then move to the recently announced solution for Office native applications. You should run awareness campaigns within your organization, educating your user, hey, we just added a new capability, a new feature that now you can classify your documents, please use it. And last but not least, after you deploy the product, I'll show you later the set of reporting capabilities that you can run in order to track the progress of your deployment, in order to see the product adoption, how your users are actually consuming the product, and how they're using it in the right way. One common question that I hear is, all right, we understand why we should classify our documents for compliance reasons, but is it actually going to enhance, to give me a better security within my organization? So I'd like to show you this example. Let's switch to my Outlook, and let's now try, I'm just now going to send an email. Sensitive data. All right, and I'm going now to attach a document. Which is called company credit cards. Quite sensitive, I would say. And that document is protected, and as you might imagine, it contains credit card numbers. Does it mean that I shouldn't be able to share it with my colleagues? No, of course not. They should be able to consume it if this is what they're doing on the regular work hours. But however, what would happen if I'd like to share it with somebody outside my organization? For example, here I have an email of a person called John, and here is his Gmail account. All right, so as soon as I just typed in John, something happened. No, I didn't want to open it. Let's try it again. I'm going to attach again, same document, credit card number. All right, you see this policy tip pop up here? Can you see that at the back as well? That policy tip basically tells me, hey, you're basically violating the organization policy. Why? Let's click here on learn more. And that will tell me, hey, we just identified that you are trying to send a document which contains credit card numbers to a person outside your domain, outside your organization. Would you like to do that or not? Also, as an admin, I have the full power to detect and to decide what's going to be the followed action. Should I simply just generate an alert? Should I just simply just trigger a pop-up to the person who's about to send that email, or would I like also to block that example? I'm going to click on send now, and in this case, I just try to actually send that document, but you see what happened. As soon as I hit on the send button, I suddenly get all these notifications saying, hey, something was wrong. And let's now move into the admin view. Okay, and the administrator basically gets a high severity alert saying, hey, we just identified data exfiltration detection that somebody within your organization has just been sending sensitive information outside the organization. Now, if we'll go to Office 365, client error, that happens as well. If we'll go to the Security Compliance Center alert screen, we'll see that basically we have a number of alerts here. And let's just click on the View Alerts. And now you can see sensitive data exfiltration, and I can see the full details of the data exfiltration incident. Who's been how the event was triggered, by whom, even if I can drill down and see the actual email that was sent. So this is a really powerful tool, and we managed to do that due to the fact that we identified that the file contained sensitive data, and due to the fact that the file had a label. You can do that both ways, by the way. You can simply create a rule on sensitive information only, or you can create a rule also on the fact that a sensitive document which was labeled was going outside the boundaries of your organization. Any questions so far about this scenario? Yes, it is. I just demonstrated that from Outlook. Yes, yes. So you mean on Outlook on a desktop, right? Yes. So this is actually doable. This is a very recent feature that we just released for Outlook endpoint devices. So that would give you a tooltip as well, and you'll also be able to block that. All right, so that was the first scenario about how classifying my data is going to improve my security, my overall security. Second scenario, very common scenario is I'd like to be able to find out what's out there. I'd like to know, to be able to identify where my sensitive data is within my organization. So let me switch to Azure Information Protection Analytics for that purpose. Guys at the back, can you see my screen? Is it all right? I'll take that as yes. No? Can you read what's going on here? I'll try to repeat it then. Data discovery screen basically is all about telling you where the sensitive data resides within your organization, whether on your endpoints or on your file repositories. So for that purpose, I'm simply just going to click now File Repository, and I can see that I get now a nice breakdown of all the documents that are being classified on my file repositories and what kind of sensitive information types they contain. This will take a while. Here we go. So I can see, for example, that we have 58 different files which contain credit card numbers. I have 43 different files which contain European national IDs, and so on and so forth. So that means that I can basically slice and dice the information within my organization and search, for example, where do I have documents which contain credit card numbers? So all what I have to do is simply just selecting credit card numbers here, running a full scan as well, filtering the data, and now I get the file repositories which contain credit card numbers. I can actually click on that file repository to drill in, and now I get the full list of files which contain credit card numbers. And in fact, this is up to you to decide if you'd like to enable this feature or not, but we also give you a deeper dive into the content of those files. So for instance, here we see that I just opened the file, and that file seems to contain a credit card number. If you'd like to see the content of that file, and if you choose to enable this feature, then you'll also be able to tell the credit card number details or any other information type, sensitive information type of your interest. For privacy reasons, this feature is disabled by default, but we've heard many of customers that ask for this specific feature, so we let you choose if you'd like to have it working or not. Also, I'd like to show you another interesting scenario. I'm sure that many of you, whenever you have to deal with usernames as passwords, just a second, I'll get to it. Normally just put them on a Word document and just save it somewhere. So if you'd like to be able to identify all kind of locations of sensitive information which contains credentials, let me just search for this for now. We developed, okay, let's go back. We developed a feature which is called credential scanning. Credential scanning allows you to identify users, passwords, or any access keys within your organization and to be able to notify the file owner on their location. Let's try it again. Going to data discovery. Choose any type of those Azure ones. And let's filter. In here, just find file repository which contains those sensitive information types, which are credentials, and I can click on one of those. And I can actually see here in this example, I have an Azure publish setting password. I can click on that one, and actually I can see the username and password hard-coded within the document. Yes, please, you have a question. What kind of? File types. So, okay, so you got the full list of supported file types within our documentation. Basically, that includes all Office applications or all Office types. It includes Adobe PDF. It includes text files, and so on. Later on, I'll show you whenever I'll deploy this scanner, you can see the different file types that are supported. But you also get the full list within our from our website. Any more questions about this specific scenario? All right. All right, so in order to be able to identify or to discover data within your organization, we say that you need, I mentioned a product called Azure Information Protection Scanner. So what's the Azure Information Protection Scanner is? The AP scanner basically allows you to scan file repositories, on-prem file repositories. Whether you have a SharePoint on-prem or whether you have a Windows server, which is accessible via CIFS, all what you have to do is to go there and configure those file repositories of interest and just enable and just turn on the AP scanner. The AP scanner can run in two different modes. It can run in a discovery mode, which basically means that it runs a full scan on all your file repositories and simply reports what kind of sensitive information types it detected. Or you can run it in enforcement mode. Whenever running it in enforcement mode, it also classifies the documents for you. So it's up to you to decide in which mode you like to use it. The first mode, the discovery mode, is open to everyone using the Azure Information Protection P1 license. The second one is a more advanced one, which actually does the classification as well, so that would require the premium license. Setting up the AP scanner is very easy. Basically, you need a SQL server for that, and you need to have a dedicated instance. It can be a VM, it can be a physical server when you're going to install the AP scanner, and then you have to specify the scanner to which locations it should run that it scan. Let me show you how it looks like. So back to my screen, AP scanner is now configured from the UI. For those of you who have been using Azure Information Protection in the past, you had a PowerShell. You could configure that through PowerShell. Now we developed some UI on top of that. And from this screen, I can basically create a profile. Let's say that you have tens of thousands of repositories, that they should all behave the same. You'd like to apply the same policy across all these different repositories. So you can actually group them together and create a profile, and under that profile, define the different repositories. In that example here, I created a profile, and here I can see how the scanner is going to behave. Should it run manually? Should I like to scan it automatically? Should it apply a policy? Should it apply a label? Or should I like just only to run it in a discovery mode? And various configurations that gives you full control. You asked me about the different file types. So here you can see the file types that are supported, okay? Various file types, CSVs, XML, and so on. And here are the file types that are excluded. If you'd like to exclude more, you can easily just configure that. And the most important part is configuring what kind of file repositories you'd like to scan. Clicking on that button here, and you can specify the file repositories that you'd like to scan within your organization. Now, this selection here was just about how you can configure your scanner. If you'd like to run your scanner, you have this nodes option here. And for the node option, you can actually choose a scanner. You can have various scanners, multiple number of scanners in Microsoft Information IT group, for instance. They have nearly 100 scanners running simultaneously. So large environments with terabytes of data can get high number of scanners. That's going to be quite challenging to manage them, and for that purpose, we developed that screen, which would make their lives and your lives a lot easier if you'd like to control that. On simply just clicking on Scan Now, and that would start running a full scan. Any questions about AP scanner? Yes, please.
Do you have only SMB repositories?
Yeah.
And SharePoint or OneDrive?
So great question. So basically, we divided the world into two, on-prem and cloud. On-prem is under the responsibility, you might call it, of Microsoft Information Protection, of Azure Information Protection. For that purpose, you need the AP scanner. And for any cloud services, you have either the O365 solution, which they are responsible of scanning SharePoint Online, for example, or OneDrive, or you have Microsoft Cloud Apps an app security broker, which will help you scan third-party clouds, such as Box, Dropbox, etc. So in order to have a full coverage across O365 cloud, third-party clouds, and on-prem, you need either purchasing 3 different products or simply just purchasing the EMS E5 or the M365, which gives you that bundle of all the different repositories. More questions?
Labels defined in Azure Information Protection as well.
Very good question. So the question was about where the labels are defined, if they're defined in Azure Information Protection or not. So for existing Azure Information Protection, existing customers probably are more familiar with this screen, which is going to come up shortly, where all the labels are defined under the Azure portal. Here we go. Very recently, when we started working with Office, in order to enhance the experience of information protection, this is, by the way, the reason why now it's no longer called Azure Information Protection, but it's called Microsoft Information Protection. So we started working with Office and migrated those labels into the Security Compliance Center to make them available across various products. So that means that they're going to be available also for SharePoint, also for OneDrive, also for Teams, also for the Microsoft CASB solution, okay? Also for Windows Defender ATP and so on. So there are going to be different consumers within Microsoft and externally which are going to consume those labels. Actually, I'd like to mention something important is that we're basically developing here, this is far beyond just developing labels internally for Microsoft. We're basically building an ecosystem, so third parties, vendors can actually consume the Microsoft Information Protection labels and empower your own products with them. For example, Adobe Acrobat just done that recently. So now the latest version of Adobe Acrobat is capable of consuming those very specific labels into their product and be able to take actions upon those labels. Let me show you an example. Here I have a document which is protected. I'll show you how you can tell that it's protected. I'm simply just going to double click on that and try to open it from my browser, but my browser will not be able to open it because that document is protected. However, if I'm going to right click on it and try to open it with Adobe Acrobat, where Adobe Acrobat implemented Microsoft Information Protection, and here we go. You can open that document almost automatically within Adobe. And how you can tell that the document is protected, you have this small icon here, and clicking on that icon and clicking on, so first of all, you say that the document is protected by Microsoft's Information Protection, and clicking on that would give you the full privileges of what you're allowed or not allowed to do with this protection. And we have, in fact, over 50 different vendors, security vendors, who are already using Microsoft Information Protection labeling embedded within their product. We have various DLP vendors. I said security vendors. This is not only security vendors. We also integrate this with Box, which compete with SharePoint. However, they provide with OneDrive, but they provide great value to their own customers. And if your organization is using Box, you shouldn't be worrying about what would happen to an encrypted document when it goes up to Box. Box would totally understand what to do with that document because Box has integrated with Microsoft Information Protection. So thanks for the question. Any more questions about what I demonstrated so far? Yes, please. Can you please repeat the question? I'm not sure I understood. Yeah. So your question is how the full scan works, basically? Oh, in terms of permission. Okay, got it. All right, so in order to run a full scan, you need to set up an Azure Information Protection solution which has the ability to access those specific file repositories. So that means that you need, so the account that is actually running this scan impersonates on behalf of that user, or you should create an admin permissions, admin privileges that should be able to access that documents. But the main assumption is that whenever you're running the AP scanner, the privileges of the scanner should be the ones that would allow the scanner to access those file repositories and open them. All right, so we discussed data discovery so far. Now I'd like to show you some more capabilities from the AP analytics page. Let me switch back to the analytics. So we've covered data discovery. Now what I'd like to show you, start with the usage reports. By the way, do we have in the audience anyone who is using Azure Information Protection Analytics already? We deployed it? No one yet? All right, so I hope that after this session you will start using it. Azure Information Protection Analytics basically gives you a high-level view of what's actually happening within your organization. You can see the total number of labeled documents within the organization. This is my personal demo environment, so it's not going to be that high, but you can imagine how it looks like in a live environment, kicking environment. You can see how many documents are being labeled, how many of them are protected. You can see the overall label trend over time. You can see the label distribution, how many documents are general, confidential, highly confidential, and you can also tell what are the different labels within the organization, what are the different applications which apply those labels. In fact, if you'd like to have a deeper dive and understand actually what kind of documents are being consumed by which customers, by which users, you can go into the activity logs blade. And the activity log blade is like, you can look at that as a UI on top of your raw data. So from here, you can run all kind of queries. For example, let's say that I'd like to see what kind of actions or what kind of sensitive data has been consumed by a user called Candy. Let's say that Candy just resigned yesterday, and she's about to leave the organization, and you'd like to know what kind of personal sensitive information Candy has been accessed so far, so you'd like to be able to maybe block it or remediate it. So simply just type in the user, and you can see that here are all the different actions that Candy performed. Here are the different documents that she's accessed. Here's an example of label upgrades. You can see label downgrades, and so on. In fact, let's search specifically for label downgrade activity. I'd like to show you something. Well, it is quite natural that users would sometimes override the automatic classifications. So it's quite legit that sometimes user would go and open a document and would declassify it. A document which used to be highly confidential, users might come and say, hey, this is no longer highly confidential. I believe that this document should be personal or general. So doing that a few times, this is quite legit. However, if you kind of identify a behavior which users do that periodically, that might suggest that something is abnormal here. So in order to do that, we give you the flexibility also to run, to create dynamic queries on top of the data that you have. So for that purpose, simply all what you have to do is to click on log analytics icon here. And basically, what you'll see is that now you have a full access to the actual raw data that is being collected from Azure Information Protection. Not only that you have full access, so here, for example, I can see all the records, I can see all the different columns. And in fact, I can write also very powerful queries on top of this raw data. So for instance here, create an example. Now let's take a look at all the label downgrades within my organization. I can choose the time. Let's say that I'd like to look at all label downgrades from the beginning of the month. Simply just going to run it. And here we go. I can see total number of label downgrades within the last month. I can also break it into a chart and try to identify all kind of behaviors here. If I'd like, for instance, to see who are the users who perform those actions, I can run my own query By the way, the language here is called KQL, which stands for Custo Query Language. This is a query language that was developed at Microsoft. Very powerful for big data. So if you're dealing with hundreds of millions of records to billions of records, the performance here should be very good for that purpose. And running this query would actually give me the total number of users, the list of users, and total number of label downgrades. So for instance, if I see that the user Alex here has done 23 label downgrades, this is a bit suspicious. And then I can actually run another query here and say, okay, now let's see what kind of specific documents those users have accessed. And I can actually get the full list of documents that those users have accessed and what was the label before the action and what was the label after the action. And if something is suspicious there, I can go deeper and investigate that. In fact, you can also generate some sorts of alerts automatically. Let me show you how you can do that. So this is part of, in fact, Azure Log Analytics is part of a component which is called Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor lets you monitor various resources within your organization, within Azure, and generate alerts as needed. So for instance, I'm going to click here on Monitor. Yes. To block a downgrade? Oh, okay, so currently, all right. All right, so I'll try to answer this question in two ways. First of all, we believe that, we're still developing here a system. We cannot be 100% right. I'm sure that there are scenarios that maybe a document was misclassified for the first place as highly confidential, and then a human basically saying, hey, I would like to override this label. This is no longer highly confidential. It should be disclassified. In order to be able to track that, what we've done is that we give you the ability, or the end user also the ability to explain why they believe that they should downgrade that document. So there is an option within the product, an embedded option within the product, that whenever a user downgrades a label, there is a pop-up there with explanation. We call it justification. So you can choose whether you'd like to automatically fire a justification pop-up whenever there is a user downgrade or not. And whenever there is a user downgrade, the user is enforced actually to provide the justification of why the label was downgraded. Did that answer your question? So it's not possible to block it because we believe that at the end of the day, users should know better. Users do know better than system what's the actual label of the document. What you can do is that you can report on that action. What you can also do, by the way, yes, straight away. Actually, I'm going to show you how you can do that. And we also have other solutions or other components within the product that can report on suspicious behaviors of users. So for example, whenever you identify that certain users are running downgrades on a larger scale, you would like to generate an alert, or you'll just like to send a notification to that user, hey, you're being monitored, we know that you are downgrading files, please explain why, or you can send an email to the employee's manager, and so on. So we believe that in such a case, because the user hasn't still violated the policy and sent that information out. Sending the information out, you can easily block it. Simply just downgrading a label, this is something that we still believe that we should let our users do that, because at the end of the day, it's the users doing their own job versus running automatic kind of algorithm to identify what's the current label, and we identify that there are some false positives in certain scenarios, but we give you the power to control that, to monitor that. All right, back to Azure Monitor. So here we have alerts. I can actually create an alert. And from this menu here, okay, you have to choose a resource. Just going to do that very, very quickly. right. You need a very good connection whenever you're doing that. So sometimes demos is not ideal. Here we go, and you choose a resource. And I'm going to filter that by Log Analytics workspace. Here we go. I choose the workspace where all my data is stored. And then you can actually create a condition on what type of conditions would you like to generate that alert. And within the add condition, basically it gives you the ability to choose, okay? So I'd like here, for example, to create, so either you choose a predefined condition from a long list of predefined conditions here. This is quite long. Or you can choose a custom log search. And by clicking on custom log search, you can basically type in any query that you like. So for instance, whenever you identified that that the user conducted more than 10 label downgrades, you can fire an alert. Now I'd just like to show you how this looks like. So let's go back to Azure Monitor. Let's leave that one and click on alerts. And we can see that let's search for the last 7 days, as this is something that I've done before this demo, and I can see that here 2 alerts were generated. And below that, you can drill into the actual alerts, and you can see, hey, we just identified, this one is an alert of AP Analytics, that we just identified that too many label downgrades have occurred. And you can set who is going to receive that email. Are you going to send it to the Azure Information Protection admin in your organization? Would you like to send it to the recipient who actually conducted the label downgrade? Would you like to send it to somebody else? And so on and so forth. All right. One last topic that I'd like to cover is about generating more sophisticated recommendations. So far you've been doing I just demonstrated all kind of capabilities that you can deploy today about how you can track the overall product usage within the organization using the usage report, how you can actually run investigation within your organization using the activity logs, and how can you easily discover sensitive data using the data discovery. But what we are developing now is a new capability which basically gives you recommendations of certain conditions within the organization which we believe that should be fixed, or you should pay your special attention to. This is the first step towards having an intelligent AI capabilities, which will basically fire alerts and recommendations, and will give you insights how you can better configure the system, what kind of policies you should create, what kind of scenarios or what kind of events you should be aware of, and how you can mitigate them easily. Here is an example that we just identified, number of sensitive informations which are currently unprotected. So for example, I'm just going to click on this one, and here we identified 4 occurrences of US-based bank account numbers which are currently unprotected. And we encourage you to apply protection here. You can actually generate a dynamic rule that whenever we identify these kind of sensitive information types, you can automatically apply that rule. Or if you like to run deeper investigation, you can simply just click on View Data and see the actual records who triggered this recommendation. Here we go, and here are the different records which contains these information types that trigger that recommendation. And as we move ahead, we are planning to add more and more capabilities, more and more intelligent capabilities, which will help you identify, for example, devices which are under high risk, for example, devices which we believe that contain malware and being accessed, and that accessed confidential data. We'll be able to identify file repositories which are currently unscanned, whether internal or on external clouds. For example, we can identify sensitive information which was stored on Box or Dropbox and let you choose, hey, maybe would you like to block it? Or maybe would you like simply just to contact the person who put that document out there and make sure that they're not doing that again. All right, so this was about recommendation and Azure Information Protection Analytics. Any questions about the analytics capabilities? Yes, please.
You showed the file operations that were done. Those were, I saw the path. It was on the local desktop on the computer.
Yeah.
How does this information, how does that information get up to Azure? Is there information set up on every setup?
Great question. So let me just repeat the question. The question was, how can we determine what kind of information is being collected on endpoints? And you're right, because in the past I only covered the AAP scanner, which basically looks at data repositories. So the way we can determine endpoints is by two different ways. First one is whether you have a Windows Defender ATP. Very recently we announced the integration with Windows Defender ATP. That means that now Windows Defender basically reports whenever a file is being detected which contains sensitive data. The second one is by using the Azure Information Protection itself. So whenever you open a document, whenever I open a Word document, for example, and I have Azure Information Protection installed on my device, you can configure the system that Azure Information Protection would not only give you those notifications, but it will also fire the fact that you as a user has accessed that document. So for instance, if you access a document and that document believes to contain social security numbers, credit cards, or any custom rule that you generate, it can be anything. You can basically write your own regexp and say, whenever I identify that a document contains project X, for example, I'd like to fire an event. So whenever such a case happens, basically your client or your endpoint's client basically would fire an event saying that that client has accessed that document and we believe that the document contains these specific sensitive information types, and that would make it available from the list here. And if you're looking at real deployments, this is a very recent feature which we just very recently released with version 145 and above. If you look at real deployments which are running those clients' versions, you'll be able to search for specific data on specific devices. So a very common use case that we heard from a number of customers, they say, all right, we know that our sensitive data is fully secured in file repositories, but whether do we have endpoints to actually access those documents? Whether do we have endpoints which copies this document and store it locally, and this is the way that you can detect that. All right, any more questions about analytics? All right, so about unified labeling, that's a great question. Unified labeling is currently in preview. It's about to be GA very, very soon. And the idea behind unified labeling is that now, if you are already an Azure Information Protection customer and you'd like to have the full power of Microsoft Information Protection, which means basically that the sensitive information types can be consumed not only from Windows devices, but also they can run it on Mac, on iOS, on Android, or you'd like to be able to use those information types also on Adobe Acrobat or any other third party, then those labels must reside on Office Security and Compliance Center. In order to do that, you have to go through the unified labeling process, okay? But I know that we are fully aware that some customers still have the concern to say, okay, this feature is still not GA yet, we are going to try it only on test environment and then move to the production. And the answer for this is that this feature is going to be very, very soon available as a GA. We already tested it with Microsoft IT with almost 200,000 employees and works perfectly. And we've just rolled it out with our private preview customers. And this is now available in public preview. And very soon it's going to be available GA. If there are no more questions, I'd like just to jump to the last slide. We covered quite a lot today, and this is about our roadmap. So, back to your question again. So, what we've just done recently, so unified labeling in Security and Compliance Center, in fact, that was just announced GA a couple of weeks ago. So thank you for asking. We have a native labeling, which means that now Android, iOS, and Mac can use sensitive information types without the need to deploy Azure Information Protection clients separately. We have the information protection SDK available GA for vendors who would like to use the information types. We integrated with various vendors. We have a solution for GDPR, which can help you using the analytics to identify GDPR. And information protection analytics was released as a public preview. All the capabilities that I just demonstrated today will be available as GA during April. What's coming out next? We are going to enhance, to expand basically our native support of information protection also for across Windows, across Outlook for Apple, iOS and Android, for Mac, iOS and Android. We're going to have more deeper scenarios around DLP classification, around automatic and recommendation classifications. We're going to support SharePoint and OneDrive. Currently, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange Online are the all 365 servers which do not support labeling at the moment. There is a work in progress. Exchange Online is about to support labeling very, very soon. Then we'll have information protection available for SharePoint and for OneDrive right after. We are going to develop OCR capabilities. So the detection is going to be not only on text, but also on images. This is very powerful as well. And last but not least, it's going to be available also for Microsoft Teams. All right. Thank you very much for attending this session at a very late time of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.